Welcome to the latest episode of Five on the Floor on the Five Reasons Sports Network. Thanks for joining us on your favorite podcast app, on Apple Podcasts, on Android, Spotify, or the Five Reasons YouTube channel. Also, make sure that you check out Off the Floor. That's our Discord server, 24/7 Heat conversation. Get off of Elon's Twitter during hurricane. Well, it feels like hurricane season, right? During election season, talk Heat 24/7. Also get insider updates, content before we send it anywhere else. And we're going to be doing stage shows, floor seats. You have floor seats to our stage shows there, and I'm going to be writing a weekly column. So check it out, $2.99 per month. Link right here in the description. Also, an announcement, our off-day episodes this season are going to be sponsored by our friend Eric Rubenstein. You can find him at ericrubenstein.com. If you have a car accident, this is the guy to go to, 877-829-3742, or more to the point, 877-829-ERIC, ERIC. EricRubenstein.com. Grew up in Lauderhill, graduated magna cum laude from St. Thomas University. He's a local guy. He's a big Miami Heat fan. And yes, you'll see him hanging out with Rick Ross at the game. So check him out, EricRubenstein.com. Thank you for sponsoring this season of Five on the Floor. And now, today's episode.
Down to Biscayne. Yikes. Five on the floor. Ride for my dogs. Where here's the thing. You can check the score. Hustle hard, couple scars, wearing bubble frogs. Just like Butler said, you in trouble, y'all. Kept the floor playing. Got it all banned. Y'all seen the block. Stop with one hand. And Pat we trust. Inspire, have the guts. We're here to bring the heat. Y'all can hang it up.
Welcome to Five on the Floor, a daily insider show on the Miami Heat and the NBA, featuring Ethan Skolnick, Greg Sylvander, and Alex Toledo, plus others from the Five Reasons Sports Network.
All right, welcome back to Five on the Floor. Here's today's floor plan. I'm Ethan Skolnick. You can follow me at Ethan J. Skolnick on the Five Reasons Sports. I got Alex Toledo. You can follow him at Tropical Blanket. And joining us, the podcast maven, you can find him, Nate Duncan, NBA. His name is Nate Duncan. We always do the home and home before the season starts. So I appeared on his podcast talking about the Heat. We actually had them in very similar position this year, but we'll get into them and some of the other teams in the NBA. We'll do a little rapid fire with Nate before we go. So this is kind of our official NBA preview. We're going to be doing a Heat-specific preview with predictions with the crew from Five on the Floor tomorrow. Nate, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Yeah, I love that intro video. That thing just washes over you like a tidal wave. I'm ready to go. Let's do it.
Well, it's very 305. It is very 305, even though I'm very 954, but that's okay. We play it out there anyway. And actually, Brady's going to be in the intro now, Alex. We've added Brady to the intro. He's officially 2 years after he actually joined us. I got around to that, so he's going to be in that intro from now on. So Nate, we're going to go through the East, but you and I talked a little bit about this on your podcast, and it just seems like it's very segmented this year. Whereas the West to me is kind of a mess. Like there are a lot of different teams that if things break right, I could see them coming out of that conference. The East, it seems like it's Boston, then it's New York. Most people have New York, Philadelphia, Milwaukee. And then kind of there's this next tier, which is some combination of Orlando, Indiana, Cleveland, and then people get to Miami. And then after that, it's sort of the teams in the middle: Atlanta, Chicago, and then there's 5 teams that probably look like they should be tanking if they're not, and they will be pretty soon. Do you see it that way? Because every national analyst has it that way right now.
Yeah, for me, I think if you're going to say every single team is healthy and they've got their entire playoff rotation and they're about to play a playoff series, yeah, I would kind of see it that way. But I think one of the key differences between those teams you had kind of in segment 3, Cavs, Magic, Pacers, is they're younger. They're probably going to be healthier than these old teams. Already Chris Middleton is going to be out to start the year. The Knicks have a bunch of injuries and they're just very thin at the top. Kristaps Porzingis is out to start the year, though I still think the Celtics will be up there. So I think certainly, like if you look at the top end talent, that's the way it should go. But during this regular season, I expect that the Cavs, the Magic, the Pacers, that those teams are going to be right in that mix with the Knicks and the Bucks and the Sixers, who are all kind of more veteran teams that have some injury concerns.
And to that point, when you look at those teams, and you mentioned Porzingis being out, some of these other guys that are out. I mean, Boston has the benefit of continuity that and coming off a championship and the confidence that comes from that. I don't really see them getting complacent because they're inventing all these slights at this point. So I sort of feel like they'll be motivated to a certain degree. If I was to say to you, and you mentioned Middleton, if I was to say to you, Philadelphia, Milwaukee, New York, which is the team you think is most likely not to live up to expectations?
I think you would probably have to say Milwaukee just because they are so thin. Even if healthy, that if you say all three of those teams are healthy, that's probably the one I believe in the least, just because they have like massive holes in their roster in terms of the ability to guard the ball. They only really have two guys who can protect the rim. They don't really have a fourth big at all. They don't have a way to trade for and get what they need necessarily either. Like they don't really have a small forward at this point that you trust that much, at least from a defensive perspective. So I think that would probably be my pick. Would be the Bucks to not live up to expectation. And then of course you throw in, an injury to Giannis or Dame or Brook Lopez, age regression, or Chris Middleton just never comes back. There's just a lot of failure points for that group.
So kind of jumping off of that, right? As you guys kind of set up the landscape of the Eastern Conference this season, are Heat fans a little bit too hard on the team for quote unquote running it back and thinking that it's going to be another play-in year? Do you think there's any sort of upside for them to jump out of it? Is it? I don't know how much you've gotten to watch the Heat so far this preseason. They've been trying to like incorporate, the 5-out spacing with Bam. They've been, there's been sort of an emphasis more than usual on scoring off points off turnovers and forcing steals and, being active, getting deflections in the passing lanes. And those are sort of the core things that they've been, drilling the most, at least from what we've been able to see on the court. I don't know how much of that like changes your outlook on them in general, but if you're a Heat fan, right, listening to this show, what is the Heat's path towards getting out of the play-in? And how realistic is it in your opinion?
Yeah, I mean, a lot to unpack in that question. I mean, you go back to just the fact that they weren't healthy at all at the end of last season. You never got to see this group. I wasn't too high on the Rozier trade. I thought it was a little financially focused. I thought that it was, firing a very small billet to get incrementally better. I would have wanted to hold on to that pick to do something bigger, but something bigger, that path hasn't really emerged. So as far as the path this year, I mean, it's got to be improving the offense. And I think Bam taking more threes is part of that. Now, they just took way too many mid-rangers last year, and they don't have a guy who's just like unbelievable from that area, like a Kevin Durant or something like that. So they just weren't able to get the ball into threatening areas. Their shot distribution just wasn't good enough when you have, average, I would say, offensive talent. So now it can Rozier, Hero taking more threes, Bam, just kind of fewer mid-rangers, more threes, then maybe you spread the floor a little bit more, open up attacks to the basket. Can that be what boosts this offense out of the 20s? Because I believe in their defense. I think their defense will be top 10. It could even be top 5, depending kind of on how the backup big situation works out. So that's it to me, is just everyone gets a little bit better, but you also just play a little smarter offensively. But, that's easier said than done. That's the shots that the defense is trying to avoid giving up as well.
All right, a couple of things on that. Let me ask you about the defense first, and then I'll pivot back to the mid-range stuff. So it's interesting where you expect them to be top 5, and I kind of do too. But it seems their backcourt is Rozier and Hero. Because it just seems like they don't. To me, they don't have as many kind of elite individual defenders as they've had at times. I mean, they've got Bam, they've got Highsmith, and they've got Jimmy when he's engaged. But otherwise, they don't have a lot. I mean, Duncan, Tyler, Terry, Jovic got much better last year. Jaquez, I think, was better than advertised defensively, but it's not like they're throwing out like this. I mean, it's not like what Boston can throw out there, right, or anything along those lines. So, like, why do you think they'll be top 5? It's just Spo and Bam, basically.
That's a pretty good start. But yeah, I think
Right.
that's more. I don't think they will be top 5. I think that maybe it has that potential, and maybe they
Right.
could defend at that level when Bam is on the floor. And you and I talked about this too, that
Yeah.
if Kevin Love is going to be the backup center, or Kelly Ware, he's a rookie, got a lot of potential, but rookie big men usually aren't going to defend very well. Or Thomas Bryant is a pretty awful defensive center. So, and yeah, there isn't a ton of athleticism to kind of fly around on the backside of plays outside of Highsmith. Nobody who really gets over a screen all that well. I know they think Rozier could be better, but he's 31 and he's a small guard. You're probably asking a lot there. So yeah, I think when Bam's off the floor, you could see them kind of struggle, but yeah, maybe they junk it up with the zone and all the stuff that they usually do. But yeah, if I had to project it, I would have them, kind of 8th or something like that defensively, because I do think they'll struggle when Bam is off the floor, or obviously if he misses time.
All right, so just to piggyback off another part of Alex's question there, which was the mid range stuff, and I look, I've never seen Spo be this transparent and specific like he's been this preseason. Like with the we're trying to get deflections defensively, which is another thing on the defensive side, and then offensively, basically threes and layups. That's what they don't have a lot of dunkers, but like threes and layups basically is what they're going for. But my only question, I understand the change. I understand why they're being transparent about it, because they need to get off to a good start this season. But I just wonder if guys go back to their habits. Like, this is my concern. Like, Jimmy likes the mid range. Bam likes the mid range. Tyler likes the mid range, right? Like Terry, kind of when feels like he's in rhythm, is going to shoot it from pretty much anywhere. I'm having a hard time seeing them stick to it when things get tough. Is that fair?
Entirely, yeah. And part of the reason that you take a mid ranger, it's not even necessarily that like, oh man, I love this. This is my comfort zone. It's, hey, shot clock's running down. This is what we got, right? Like we're giving the ball to Jimmy Butler, and like that's the shot that he's capable of getting. Or same thing with Bam, where all right, he's gone through a bunch of handoffs and nobody is open, and so all right, he's going to turn around. The big is taking away the back door, and he's open to just shoot an elbow jump shot, which to his credit he gets better at incrementally every year, but it's still he's not like that over 50% for mid range type of guy. I think the two guys that I would look at, I guess 3 would be Bam trying to take more threes, to do more of that handoff stuff from outside, and then he turns around, the biggest on him, he takes a 3 instead of a 2. Hopefully you're not at the point where Bam has to face the basket and go one-on-one and shoot a mid-ranger, that you have other options with Rozier and Hero being healthy. And then Hero's the other one too, to just, you and I talked about him doing more stuff off ball. Hopefully those plays are run for threes. And then the thing about having gravity at the 3-point line is now they have to guard you out there. Now you can blow by and you have a runway to get all the way to the rim, as opposed to having to pull up from mid-range. So I think those are the ways that they can do it. Jimmy's going to be Jimmy. Like, he's not going to take a huge volume of threes. We'll be arguing about whether he should shoot a set shot or a jump shot from 3, for the rest of his career. So I think that's the way that you, in theory, could do it. But again, like that's the shot the defense is trying to force you into, and they don't have like these guys who are just going to blow to the basket, force help, and like kick out for a wide open corner 3 like that. Those sorts of plays aren't as available to the Heat as for some teams.
So I think you absolutely nailed kind of the stuff that we've been talking about so far early on here, in the sense of like, how effective can their 5-out spacing be? How can they commit to it on a night-to-night basis? And even though like you can push the 5-out button, right, and have everybody spaced, that doesn't mean it's going to be as effective as the Boston Celtics 5-out, right? When you got Jimmy and Bam as 2 of the guys spacing out there, it's ultimately a positive for the Heat. But it's like, I'm going to be really interested to see how teams adjust to it and defend it throughout the season, because like, you had the other night, I forgot who it was that jumped at the thought of Bam taking a 3 and just gave him all this space to attack. It's just a crazy thing that I would have never thought we would be watching, like, when the Jimmy era started. And I'm not sure how it's going to work out, but I do think the commitment to the right shot profile is something that is going to help their offense ultimately. And when you watch some of the stuff in preseason, I try not to take too much away from it, of course, because it's preseason, but like the ball movement has looked pretty crisp. You've had, I think, a little bit more space for Rozier and Hero to get to the paint and get to the rim a little bit more, which is stuff that fans have been asking for, specifically of Hero, forever, right? And then you've got a Jimmy who last season sort of looked like he was declining as far as getting to the rim, as far as being the defensive playmaker he's been throughout his Heat tenure, I think giving him that much more space to work with when he does get the ball is a positive thing as well. But it's how much do you believe in this whole like the emphasis of keeping the ball moving and how much that they can keep to it? Because I feel one way about it where it's like this is positive, but like Ethan said, is it just going to be, well, the defense is going to end up just asking you to take these mid-range shots and they're really comfortable at taking them, right? Like I think Jimmy, Bam, Tyler, Terry, they all resort to it at times when things get tougher. So how much does the emphasis matter as opposed to tendencies and just taking what the defense gives you? Because I think that's going to be like one of the battlegrounds that I'm going to be looking for with the Heat offense this season is how much do they respect the 5 out and how often do guys just go back to their tendencies? Sorry for rambling there a little bit.
Yeah, no, it's a very common. I do 30 season outlooks for all the teams, and Ethan is a great guest for that. And I would say 20 of them we're talking about how the team wants to shoot more threes this year and take fewer mid rangers, right? So Phoenix, Mike Budenholzer wants to take more threes. They're doing it in the preseason. If you look at the preseason stats or you just watch preseason basketball, generally more threes are going to go up, right? Like guys have been working on it all year. Or all summer, I should say. They want to show that off, and the defense isn't as intense or not as locked in night to night on opposing tendencies. I go back to like when the Bulls fired Tom Thibodeau and they brought in Fred Hoiberg. It's like, oh my God, Nikola Mirotic is bombing. Like they took 39 threes, which was a lot for 2015. Like it's going to be totally different. And that's like, no, actually, you kind of just are what your personnel is in this regard once you really get into the season. So I think it'll be incremental improvement is possible. I think, the Bam taking threes thing, if that's real, again, it's, it would be quite an improvement to just, the last month of the season, all of a sudden he's taking them and now he's good at them. It's like, I figured there's a reason he wasn't taking them before, right? So it's like, is it just, you can't just like flip a switch and now he's good at it. It's something that takes a while. But if that's real, if you actually have a center who can space the floor, that can be revolutionary. I'm thinking it's going to be more of all right, he'll kind of take it as a last resort type of thing, Jonas Valanciunas type. But if he's taken, 5 threes per 36 minutes or something like that, that actually could be revolutionary. I'm not pricing that in because that would just be such a massive improvement over one season. But, we've seen it with like a Brook Lopez before. He's a good free throw shooter. So that could give everyone so much more space to operate potentially. I'm not sure how good he's going to be at that necessarily, but that's the way that this really changes things.
Well, I put the over under at his threes per game at about 2.5. In terms of
and that's not enough. That's not enough.
But I will say there is a precedent with the Heat. I mean, they did this with Bosch. If you look at Bosch's numbers, his 3-point attempts, they went up, and Bam has been shooting the thing in practice. It's kind of been about mostly giving him the green light and the confidence to do it, which it seems like Spo's arm has been twisted enough at this point, particularly through the Olympics, that he's done it. I want to do some Heat rapid fire with you here, and then on the other side we'll do the West, and we'll go through it quickly. All right. So first, would you trade Jimmy Butler at the deadline?
Depends what you can get and how good they are. If they're trending towards 41 and 41, and you could get a couple of draft picks for him. There comes a point at which you're obviously not going to win a championship with this group. If he's, the better he plays, the less you want to trade him, right? If he's not playing well and it's looking like, all right, he's going to opt into this player option and we're not going anywhere anyway. We're out draft picks. We need to just completely reset this era around Bam. Yeah, it certainly wouldn't be something that is like, can't be considered, particularly given how he might play.
Does Jaime Jaquez, in your opinion, have a borderline all-star potential?
I don't think so. Although someone in the Heat development system, I never write them off completely due to their track record. But I think physically, he just doesn't have the characteristics you usually see from that type of wing player. Unless you're like Luka Doncic, it's just, I know he was in the dunk contest, but I think, overall, he's not that. I was surprised to see him in there. I guess I will put it that way. But, he's not a great lateral mover, doesn't have a great first step. He kind of plays more of like a bully ball. I think he can be very effective against weaker defenders. But if you're looking at someone who is going to be a number one option going up against the opposing team's best wing defender every night, I don't see him as that type of player. I don't think he has the wiggle, the passing skills, the ability to get to the basket, the 3-point shooting. Like there's what is just the like blow you away skill that's going to pop to make him an all-star.
Yeah, it feels like a lot of 7.5s out of 10, which again is a good player. And one more for me, and then I'll let Alex get in with one, and then on the other side, we'll go with this. What is the player ideally you would pair with Bam to have a chance to win a title?
Another Alex Saratz's client, Giannis.
I know which one that is. I've heard, but with that, okay, but to that point though, because this seems to be where this is trending, where if there's one guy, one top 10, top 15 player who could become available over the next year or so, it seems like Giannis is at least setting the stage for it. We're hearing this kind of talk. But would it, I guess I ask you, would a Giannis Bam pairing? I mean, we printed T-shirts, Giannis Bam 21, so it's not like we're ignoring the possibility. But I mean, we'll just reframe those. It'll be Giannis Bam 25 or 26 or whatever it is. But with that, you would need a third guy with there, right? Like that was because
Yeah, no, it was kind of a glib answer. I
yeah.
admit it. Although Bam shooting threes does make it more interesting. It certainly. I mean, I think you would like someone like because you can find guards. You know, like you could find a decent point guard. Like that's not that difficult. I mean, the hardest thing to find is a wing. So if you want me to snap my fingers and pick someone, it would be a really good shooting wing. So you know, like a Kevin Durant type of player. It would be the guy who I think you would like a lot. Bam could still do a lot of handling, and then you would have probably more of a traditional point guard. But I mean, I think Bam gives you such a good foundation for your defense. But I would want that player to also, I wouldn't want it to be like Donovan Mitchell. Obviously, I mean, you take what you can get when it comes to getting a star, but I wouldn't want it to be a small guard because Bam has so much defensive versatility that I would want to be big up and down the lineup, and then that would just be like so unbelievably powerful. I wouldn't want to, that's why I've never particularly cared for Tyler Hero with this group for that same reason. Right? Like you want Bam to be unleashed, not having to cover for everyone else.
Alex, you got one before a break?
It's amazing that you said that as like the way to finish your point, because that transitions perfectly into what I was going to ask you. Let's go back to something I mentioned before. They're trying to do this whole thing where like, we know that we can't guard you straight up for an entire possession, every single possession because of their starting lineup, right? At least that's how I'm taking it. They're doing this thing where we're going to play the same defensive scheme we did last year as they went back to the drop last year, except even more aggressive, right? They've always been aggressive help team, aggressive, plug the gaps team. And now they're doing it with this way of like, there's an emphasis on defensive playmaking too. And you're seeing it from Jovic, you're seeing it from Jimmy and Bam, of course, but you've seen it a lot, surprisingly, like from Terry and Tyler. And I think this is something that has been told to them. And of course, it's just much easier said than done. But how do you feel about this sort of like way to compensate for, I guess, if you want to call them each suboptimal defenders, right? So we don't have to get into good, bad, all that. Like, how do you feel about just that tactical shift to like, okay, this is one way that we're going to make up for it? Because they've both done an excellent job. Like, that's one of the most surprising things so far preseason. Not sure if that's going to keep up, because that's a hard thing for all of them to keep up. But they've been getting like 15 steals a game in the preseason. And it's just been really interesting to me. Like, you get Spo with a long summer like this, and he comes out with like, it's not a complete shift. It's like, no, you're just going further on the spectrum of like aggressive defense and doing it with this specific personnel. So how do you feel about that? And do you think it's something that, like, because I know you mentioned you think that they can be like a high level defense anyways, you already trust it, but do you think this is a strategy that is going to end up benefiting them, or something that is just going to be too hard to keep up throughout a season?
Well, I think it's great to try new things, and particularly given how powerful offenses are already. Even if you have a good defense, teams are scoring a ton. We'll see if that carries over into this new regime with fewer fouls being drawn. But like turnovers are really, really important plays, not only because you wipe out an opponent possession, but then you also get a fast break yourself for a team that's not going to be probably an elite half court offense. And we've seen defenses that have been built on this before. The Raptors under Nick Nurse, the Bulls, who I thought were going to be a terrible defense when they acquired DeMar DeRozan and Nikola Vucevic, actually were good because they just forced a ton of turnovers. And like, if you can be top 5 in the league in forcing turnovers, everything else can be average and you can be a top 10 defense. That's how powerful getting, 3 more turnovers or steals per game than your opposition can be. And then it also boosts your offense as well. So I think generally trying to search for more of those is good, particularly because it's like, hey, we're not that great of a defense anyway in some of these lineups. So we might as well force a turnover because they're going to score on us anyway. Like if we give up more behind the play, it's not the end of the world. And I do think it also pairs well with just the general strategic approach that I think the Heat have been at the forefront of it. I mean, you mentioned how they plug the gaps. Generally, they just get guys further up the floor and they make people at the top of the key see bodies, whether that's in that zone defense, the 2-3, where they'll try to sneak the guy out of the corner up to the wing when the corner isn't filled, or in their base man-to-man principles that they've done over the years, where again, if someone's in the corner, they'll have a guy almost standing at the elbow, and would say, hey, he can just close out on a diagonal back to the guy if the ball goes to the corner. Let's make everyone at the top see more bodies. So it is, I think, a natural extension of that to try to get into the passing lanes even more. And especially during the regular season, it's going to take teams being really intentional, forcing them to guard in the corner, to open up space to attack from the top, find ways to get behind the defense backdoor. Like that's just not something that a lot of teams can do, particularly if they're bad. And so I think that is certainly a worthwhile thing to try, particularly when you don't have the greatest individual defenders at times.
All right. When we come back, we're going to do some rapid fire on the West and the NBA. We thank Nate for his time, as always, here. Follow him at Nate Duncan NBA. We're sponsored today by Prize Picks. Use the code 5FIVE. Put down $5. You get 50 to play right away. That's like $5 down, 50 to play right away. Legal in the state of Florida. You can pair 2, 3, 4 players together in a lineup. Again, go to prizepicks.com, Google Play Store, or the Apple App Store. All right, let's get to it here. Hartenstein injury, OKC. I like their offseason better than pretty much anybody else's. Should they be considered the favorite in the West?
Not yet. To me, I don't think their offense is good enough. As much as it was great to get Hartenstein and Caruso, I mean, they basically got those guys for free. Hartenstein with cap space and Caruso for Giddey, a guy who wasn't even going to start for them. And I think their defense will be a monster. But I think they have more work to do to have a good enough offense where I'm really seeing them as a significant favorite, because that's what failed for them last year. They didn't shoot the ball well enough. They didn't space the floor well enough. Their offensive concepts didn't hold up very well when Dallas just started keeping guys close to the rim. I think Shai Gilgeous-Alexander was good enough. I thought he had a very solid playoffs, but nobody else really could. I'm also a little bit worried about a shooting regression there from the likes of, say, a Lou Dort. I'm not sure how well Caruso is going to shoot it compared to Giddey. I don't know if he is actually that much of a shooting upgrade in terms of his volume. So I think I want him to get one more offensive player. They only have 2 guys who can dribble on this team, really, with Shai and Jalen Williams. So that they need, I think, one more reasonable creator and one more shooter. Maybe that could be the same guy, but of course they have the assets and the matching salary to go get that player.
So one trade that was made recently, the whole Karl Anthony Towns to New York, Randall and DiVincenzo to Minnesota, was a really surprising trade, at least for me, when it happened. And the consensus, of course, is that Cat is the best player in the deal. I was looking at the roster and just like trying to imagine how this will play out. I feel like Minnesota, I mean, they obviously got deeper. They got the 2 players for 1, 2 guys who, Randall is a guy who's made all NBA teams, of course. And DiVincenzo just was on fire for the Knicks last year. I think last game played was when he dropped 39. Just how much do you think, first of all, DiVincenzo's shooting carries over? Do you think it was a blip in his resume where like he just had a really hot shooting year? And do you think the depth will matter for Minnesota, or is it all just going to get overshadowed by maybe the Randall fit, right? And how much it could mess with their spacing if he's not having a good shooting year, as playing him with Gobert. Maybe you have to do some intense staggering. Do you think Minnesota's end from it, do you think there's upside for them to actually be better? Because it feels like there's been a lot of, talk that they're the ones that lost this trade, but I'm not sure. I'm not as sure. I think it's a little bit more complicated than that. How do you feel?
Well, us cap dorks liked it due to some of the financial component. They also got the draft pick in the deal. DiVincenzo is on a great contract for a while. So certainly I would say they won that aspect of it with Karl Anthony Towns making $60 million 3 years from now. But I think in a vacuum, yeah, Karl Anthony Towns maybe is the best player, but he also has these limitations. We're going to see how he looks playing center now for the Knicks. They got Gobert because they didn't think he could play center. And I actually don't think that Karl Anthony Towns was that important to what they were doing last year. Like, he's a very good shooter, but he's mostly playing the 4. And is he that much better as a 4 as a shooter than your average 4? Like, I wasn't so sure about that. And then you add DiVincenzo, they're now probably the deepest team in the league in terms of their talent, 1 through 8, 1 through 9. And that helps them fill a hole that they had at backup guard. I do think he's going to continue to shoot it, to your point, maybe not at the same percentage, but he's going to get them up. But they also, like the Heat, kind of had a math problem. They didn't take enough threes last year, and their spacing was compacted. And while I do think that DiVincenzo is going to really help there, Randall probably won't. But Randall also, I think, generates more threes for his teammates than Karl Anthony Towns. Like, he actually probably requires a double team in the post. He's a better passer, I would say, than Towns. He's a little bit more facile as a ball handler. I thought he looked great in that preseason game. I think he's ready to go. So I could see it going wrong, but I think there's a very good argument that they could be better this year. They definitely won the financial aspect of the trade. I could be wrong. There might be certain matchups like against Denver when they wanted Towns to guard Jokic. They don't have that look quite as much anymore, but I'm pretty optimistic on the Wolves this year.
All right, I'll blow through here a few of these quickly. One, do the Lakers get out of the play-in this year?
Well, they might win games in the play-in to get out of it. Is that what you mean? But no, I will not be projecting them to be a top 6 team in the West this year.
All right, Golden State. Do they get out of the? Do they even get into the play-in this year? I have my doubts.
Yeah, I mean, I think they'll be in the top 10 in the West. I think so. I mean, they're like Steph Curry obviously is the linchpin of everything, but they can withstand an injury basically everywhere else. They're another team that's incredibly deep. They might have the deepest roster 1 through 11, 1 through 12 in the league. They just don't have that second offensive star. And I do think Curry is not at the level that he was 2-3 years ago when he was sort of an offense unto himself. So I think they could struggle on the offensive end. I think they're actually going to be really good defensively, and interested to see which of these young guys can take a step forward for them. But I think they're going to be a solid team night to night, but obviously they'll struggle to score with Steph off the floor if he misses time.
All right, one more. Wemby, he's already been anointed for Defensive Player of the Year. I feel like that award has been unanimously given at this stage. How far away? How far? I love the kid, but I mean, come on. Like, seriously. Like, are they even going to be a top 20 defense? Like, come on. But it's just more and more excuses to ignore Bam at this stage. But how far are they away, do you think, from being a playoff team? Because it feels to me like they're not going to wait that long. The history of centers like him, in terms of durability, and also, Pop, I think, wants to try to win here relatively quickly. Plus, Wemby wants to win. So where do you think they're at? To me, they're like they're one of the more interesting teams in the West.
Well, they have maybe one above average starter right now, who would be Wembanyama. They don't have a second creator on this team. And of course, they've got Devin Vassell, who is out to start the year. He's been injury prone. Maybe he's your second above average starter, but he probably profiles as like, your 4th best player on a really good team, maybe 3rd best. So yeah, the Chris Paul thing, Harrison Barnes, like they should be slightly more respectable, but like they're still going to be messing around. It sounds like starting Jeremy Sohan. Also, they got guys like Stephon Castle, who are rookies, are going to need to play. He's not going to be any good this year. The backup big isn't great either. So like they have no shooting whatsoever on this team. Like I was shocked. I mean, I think maybe it's the Wemby hype train that they had an over under in the mid 30s. I think they'll be below that, even if Wembanyama, I think Wembanyama will actually push them to be a top 10 type of defense when he's on the floor, but I don't think they'll be good when he's off. So yeah, I mean, I think Wembanyama had a case as a top 5 defender even last year, especially once they moved him to center. And he does just change the game in a way that no one else does. But I think just on the team level, no, they're going to be pretty bad this year.
All right, we'll close here. Let's just get you on the record because I think you and I were in a similar place. Heat wins this year.
Yeah, nothing's really changed since we did our pod. I had 45 wins.
Seems about right. I think the number in Vegas is 45.5, 44.5, I believe, something along those lines. I feel like everybody is there, and yet I feel like the way the season starts and whether they decide to pivot could change. And we talked about this when I was on with you. Could change the trajectory of that win total one way or the other. Nate, we appreciate you. Thanks for Alex. Thanks, Alex, for joining. Of course, we'll always follow him at Tropical Blanket. Follow Nate Duncan NBA. Subscribe to Off the Floor. And I guess Nate, have you dropped our pod yet? No, not yet. Right? Or you did?
No, I have. Yeah. It's on my
All
premium service, Dunked on Prime.
Okay.
So that's how you can listen to that. But yeah. No,
and he
thanks
does
for
all
coming on.
30.
I
He
love
does
doing
all.
this home
He
and
does
home.
all 30. He does all 30 teams too. So make sure that you.
Yeah.
I can't imagine the discipline that requires. I can't even decide what we're going to pot on tomorrow. Nate, thank you. We appreciate it.
All right, thank you, Ethan.
Thank you for listening to the
Thanks.
Five on the Floor on the 5 Reasons Sports Network. After all, someone needs to listen to my dad.